To obtain more notary knowledge, explore the full collection of books by Derek Spruill and find the perfect book for your notary business. Visit any online bookstore, Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble Bookstore, booksofmillion.com, bookshop.org, Mobile Notary by DerekSpruill.com, or download from Kindle to obtain your essential notary book to help with all your notarization starting today.
Imagine stepping into like a massive, highly secure bank vault.
Oh, sure. The kind with like the laser grids and everything.
Exactly. You're looking at this 2-foot thick steel door,
Yeah.
Complex biometric time locks, motion sensors, all of it designed to protect the physical assets inside.
Right.
But what if I told you that in the legal world, the equivalent of that vault door isn't made of steel or concrete at all?
Wait, really? What is it then?
What if the only thing locking down the integrity of, our society's most critical documents, wills, property deeds, multi-million-dollar business contracts, is literally just a few words spoken into the air?
I mean, it definitely sounds super fragile when you frame it that way. You can't touch a spoken word. But legally speaking, that invisible, fleeting moment of speech it's actually one of the strongest locks our justice system has ever engineered.
Welcome to Notary Knowledge. I'm Eddie, and with me is our resident expert, Marylyn.
So glad to be here.
Today is Foundational Fridays, and our theme for this session is verbal ceremonies and oaths.
Which is such a crucial topic.
It really is. This is the absolute bedrock of your notarial duties, especially if you are, an entry-level notary just building your practice.
Yeah.
Now, in prior shows, you learned the critical basics of verifying a signer's identification.
Right, the ID stuff.
But today, we are shifting our focus to the immense, really transformative power of the spoken word.
And we are honestly not exaggerating when we call it transformative.
No, not at all.
As a notary, you are a commissioned public official. So the specific words you require a signer to speak out loud, they literally alter the DNA of a document.
Wow, alter the DNA.
Yeah. It takes a private, everyday piece of paper and elevates it into a public record that carries the full, formidable weight of the state's perjury laws.
That's heavy. But before we get into the exact mechanics of how that transformation happens, I want to give you a crucial tool for your practice.
Oh, absolutely.
I strongly encourage you to pick up Derek Spruill's Notary Knowledge books. Specifically, you need to add The Notary Public Foundation, Essential Guide to Core Duties, Ethics, and Commissioning, to your professional library.
It's just such a great resource.
It really is an indispensable resource for understanding the why behind all the rules we discuss here. Also, please take a moment to rate this program, subscribe, and share it with your fellow notaries. Your support allows us to keep this knowledge flowing.
We really appreciate it.
We're going to take a brief pause right here for a commercial break, but don't go anywhere. When we return, we are exploring the sheer weight of the words you use.
Welcome back, everyone.
Yeah, welcome back.
Let's seamlessly transition from that broad concept of your foundation as a notary to the actual literal words that are spoken during a ceremony.
Right.
So why are we placing such a heavy focus on oaths today?
Well, basically because, according to the National Notary Association guidelines, the verbal ceremony is where a massive amount of confusion happens out in the field.
Oh, for sure. All the time.
As a notary, you are essentially asking someone to make a legally binding promise. But there are two distinct ways to execute that promise. You've got an oath and an affirmation.
Which a lot of people mix up.
Exactly. So an oath is a promise made to a higher power. It traditionally ends with the phrase, "So help you God."
Right.
An affirmation, on the other hand, is a promise based entirely on personal honor. It's made strictly under the penalty of perjury, with absolutely no religious context.
And understanding that distinction is vital. But what is even more important is understanding the legal parity between the two.
Yeah, they carry the same weight.
Exactly. The wording is different just to accommodate the diverse belief systems of the public, but the legal outcome is absolutely identical.
Right, the state doesn't care.
They do not care whether a signer swore to a deity or affirmed on their own personal integrity. If they lied on that document, they are committing perjury. The mechanism of accountability is exactly the same.
I find it really helpful to think of it as the difference between a spiritual vow and a secular vow.
That's a good way to look at it.
Both trigger the exact same legal trapdoor if the signer is lying. But here is like a real-world scenario that almost every new notary runs into.
Let's hear it.
You put the document down on the table, you explain the two options clearly, and the signer just stares at you with his blank look and says, I don't know, whatever you think is best. Which one should I pick?
Oh, no. That is a trap.
It happens so much.
It seems harmless, but you cannot fall into it. You must never choose for the signer based on your own beliefs or even just, to speed the appointment along.
Because if I pick for them, I'm essentially giving unauthorized advice.
Exactly.
I'm crossing the line from an impartial witness into more of an advisor role.
Precisely. You are compromising your impartiality. You can explain the difference between the two concepts, just as you outlined a minute ago, but the choice must be purely 100% the signer's.
Right.
If you present one option as preferred, or if you just make the selection for them, it completely invalidates the deeply personal nature of that promise.
That makes total sense.
And once they do make their choice, we enter into the actual verbal ceremony. And we really have to emphasize this for everyone listening. Nonverbal communication simply does not work here.
No nods.
A grunt, a simple head nod, or a mumbled mm-mm is legally unacceptable.
It makes sense if you think about how legal proceedings are recorded. Like if a court reporter is typing a transcript of a deposition, they can't type a head nod.
Right, exactly.
Ambiguity destroys legal certainty. You need a definitive, audible response. When you ask, do you swear or affirm that the statements in this document are true, you must hear a clear I do or yes.
And if they just nod at you, you really have to hold your ground. You simply say, politely but firmly, for the record, I need a verbal yes or no.
I love that phrasing. For the record.
It works. So now that we have established what these promises actually entail, we need to discuss the specific notarial act where they are absolutely mandatory, which is the jurat.
Oh, jurats. They are incredibly strict. For a novice listener who's just learning the ropes, a jurat, which is often called a verification on oath or affirmation, it demands two distinct actions to happen simultaneously. First, the signer has to sign the document right there, physically in front of you. And second, they must take that verbal oath or affirmation we just explored. You cannot have one without the other.
No, you can't. If they signed the document at home before they met you, they literally have to sign it again in your presence.
It's non-negotiable.
But there is a deeper reason for this strict structure, and Derek Sproul's work provides brilliant insight into this. He discusses the concept of the psychological barrier to fraud.
Yeah, this is one of the most compelling ideas we found in the source material. Like, if a fraudster is forging a signature in the privacy of their own living room, there is almost zero friction.
Nobody is watching them.
Exactly. But when a jurat is required, you are forcing that person to stand in front of a commissioned public official, look you directly in the eye, raise their right hand, and verbally declare a lie out loud under the explicit threat of perjury.
That process intentionally awakens the conscience. It creates this massive psychological hurdle.
Yeah, it really does.
It forces the individual to consciously acknowledge the gravity of their action in real time. If you, as the notary, skip the verbal oath just because you feel awkward or you're rushed,
Which happens a lot.
you aren't just cutting administrative corners, you are actively dismantling the psychological barrier that protects the public trust.
And the consequences of dismantling that barrier are genuinely severe. We aren't just talking about a slap on the wrist from a commissioning board.
It's far from it.
Look at that civil litigation case out of Seminole County, Florida that was detailed in our research.
Oh, that case is the ultimate cautionary tale for notaries.
Tell them what happened.
Well, a presiding judge actively declined to rule on a judgment simply because the notary involved failed to administer the verbal oath for an affidavit that was central to the lawsuit.
Wow. Just picture the ripple effect of that omission. You have this complex legal proceeding, likely involving, significant financial stakes, attorney's fees, months of preparation.
So much time and money.
And it grinds to an absolute halt because a notary skipped a 5-second question. The plaintiff didn't speak the oath, the notary didn't require it, and suddenly that pivotal affidavit wasn't worth the paper it was printed on.
It just goes to show that the verbal ceremony isn't just bureaucratic theater. It is the active catalyst that gives the document its legal efficacy.
Totally.
However, maintaining this level of strictness leads to some incredibly complex, tricky scenarios for notaries working out in the real world.
Which brings us perfectly to our next segment, where we explore exactly those kinds of friction points. We are going to pause for a brief commercial break, but keep listening. We'll be right back.
Welcome back. It is time to dive right into our segment. Good question. What would you do?
I love this segment. This is where we tackle specific, often pretty complicated scenarios submitted by you, our listeners from all across the country.
Yes.
We are taking the textbook rules we just discussed and applying them to the messy reality of the job.
Let's start by looking at communication barriers. Paul in Tennessee sent us a fascinating scenario.
Okay, what's Paul dealing with?
Paul encountered a signer who is hearing impaired and nonverbal, communicating entirely through sign language. Paul's question is, how do you administer a verbal oath to someone who is nonverbal?
Oh, wow. My initial thought here would be, if they can't speak, can't they just, write their response on a piece of paper?
That's what most people think.
But I guess in a real-time legal ceremony, writing might not definitively prove uncoerced, immediate comprehension.
That is exactly the issue. Writing removes that immediate conversational verification. So for authoritative guidance here, we can actually look to the Pennsylvania Code.
Yep.
Specifically, Section 167.44a, which serves as a superb national benchmark. The rule states you must use a qualified interpreter.
Ah, an interpreter.
Yes, both you and the signer must communicate directly through that interpreter in a language you both understand.
So the interpreter acts as a verifiable chain of communication. They translate your spoken English oath into sign language, and then they translate the signer's affirmative response back to you. The ceremony is still fully occurring in real time. It is just being facilitated through a certified neutral third party.
Yep, it preserved the integrity of the real-time response. Now, staying on the theme of communication barriers, let's look at a scenario where the barrier is administrative.
Okay, lay it on me.
Grace from Idaho finds herself asked to notarize a document written entirely in Spanish, but Grace only speaks and reads English.
Oof, this feels like a minefield.
Hasn't it?
On one hand, I might think, well, I don't need to read the contract to watch them sign it. But on the other hand, the National Notary Association rules state there is no law against foreign language documents, with a major caveat.
And what's the caveat?
The notary and the signer must understand the same language.
Right, because if you don't share a language, how can you determine if they are signing willingly or if they even understand what the document is?
You literally can't.
The Connecticut Manual provides excellent supplementary guidance here, warning notaries to use their absolute best judgment. You can only proceed if you can, at a very minimum, determine the nature of the document.
Right.
But the golden rule is this. You must only sign a notarial certificate that is written in a language you read and understand.
Which totally makes sense. If I sign a Spanish Tarot certificate, I'm swearing to a legal process I can't even read.
Exactly.
But what if the signer asks the notary to just translate the document for them right there?
Bad idea. Using Florida's rules as an industry standard, a notary cannot certify the accuracy of a translation.
And think about why that is. If I am translating the document for the signer, and then I am notarizing that very same document, I'm essentially authenticating my own interpretation of the text.
You've completely lost your impartiality.
Exactly. I've lost my status as an impartial third-party witness. I'm now a participant in the transaction.
That is a brilliant deduction. The only exception is if you, acting entirely as a private citizen, translate a document and then sign an affidavit swearing to your translation's accuracy.
Okay, so you're the signer then.
Right, which is then notarized by a completely different notary. You can never be the translator and the notary on the same document.
Makes total sense. So we know how to handle the verbal barriers, but how do we prove this chain of communication actually happened on paper? Beth in Oregon ran into this.
What did Beth ask?
She notes her state has specific forms and asks, how is an affirmation actually documented?
Well, Oregon offers a great example of administrative clarity. When you administer an oath of office there, the state provides forms requiring you to physically circle either the word sworn or affirmed directly on the certificate.
Oh, I like that. So the verbal oath is like the unique key turning in a lock, and circling that specific word on the certificate is the receipt proving to the state that the door was actually locked.
That's a great way to put it.
It proves the choice was offered, the signer made a selection, and the ceremony was completed exactly according to their preference.
That is a perfect functional analogy. Now, what happens when the barrier isn't language, but time?
Time, okay.
Yeah, Tom in Montana sent in a scenario that I guarantee every notary has faced.
I'm ready.
Tom is sitting across from an agitated signer who is just rushing through a massive stack of loan documents. The signer taps their watch and says, "Look, I know the drill. Can't we just do one big oath for this whole stack of papers and get it over with?"
Oh, man. It is incredibly awkward to force a rushing, high-powered executive to slow down at a dining room table. When you are looking at like 50 pages, doing a separate oath for every single one feels intensely repetitive.
It does feel repetitive, but the answer is an emphatic no.
Not allowed.
Not allowed. Using a Q&A from Tennessee as our standard benchmark, You must administer a separate individual oath or affirmation for each and every jurat performed in that package. You cannot do a blanket oath.
Because doing a blanket oath dilutes that psychological barrier Sproul talks about. You can't just, bulk process legal accountability.
Exactly.
Sproul's ethical guidelines are crystal clear on this. If the signer treats the ceremony with levity, treats it like a joke, or refuses to do it for each required document, bowing to their impatience compromises your own commission. You have to stop the notarization.
Which perfectly sets up our final scenario from Luke in New Mexico.
Okay, what does Luke have for us?
Luke asks the ultimate question about authority. When is it actually okay to just say no and refuse a notarization?
That's tough. Saying no feels like you were failing at your job, but really, it is your job.
Exactly.
Looking at the Connecticut Manual, specifically Rule 394, it provides a crucial framework. It states you cannot unreasonably refuse a notarization.
Right.
Unreasonable refusal generally refers to discrimination, which is illegal and strictly prohibited. But you are the gatekeeper of the process.
You absolutely are. You are legally obligated to refuse the notarization if you detect duress, meaning someone is being visibly pressured or threatened to sign.
Wow.
You must refuse for incompetence, meaning the signer is heavily medicated or otherwise cannot comprehend what they are doing. And, of course, you must refuse if there is an obvious intent to deceive or a lack of proper identification.
Saying no to fraud is the core function of your office.
Exactly.
And once you successfully navigate all of those difficult scenarios, you verify the ID, you assess their willingness, and the signer clearly says, "I do," to the verbal oath, you still have to finish the job.
Right, the paperwork.
You have to create the physical manifestation of that ceremony, which is the notarial certificate.
The certificate is the tangible proof that the ceremony occurred. And there is no room for creativity here.
None at all.
Relying on Oregon's standard, which is widely recognized as a national best practice, there are 6 strict components required on every single certificate.
Okay, let's break them down.
First is the venue. This is the state and county where you are physically standing when the notarization takes place.
Because venue establishes your jurisdiction. If you are commissioned in New York, but you perform a notarization while physically sitting in a coffee shop in New Jersey, you have zero authority.
Exactly.
The venue proves you are acting within your legal boundaries. Number 2 is the notarial language. This tells the receiving agency exactly what act was performed like. Was it an acknowledgement or a jurat?
Right. Number 3 is the signer's name. You must clearly state exactly who appeared before you, tying that specific person to the specific act.
Crucial.
And number 4 is the date of the notarization.
Which is vital for establishing a timeline and preventing retroactive fraud, like someone trying to backdate a will.
Oh, absolutely.
The final 2 components are added directly by you.
Yeah.
Number 5 is your legible notary stamp.
Oh.
If it is smudged or running out of ink to the point that a court clerk's photocopier can't read it, the document can be rejected.
It happens more than you'd think.
And finally, number 6 is your notary signature.
And that signature must exactly match the signature you have on file with your commissioning authority.
Makes sense.
If you miss just one of those 6 components, if you forget to write the county in the venue section or you leave off the date, you have effectively neutralized a legally binding document.
Just from one mistake.
Yep. The entire weight of the legal transaction hinges on you meticulously checking those 6 boxes.
It is a profound level of responsibility. And this connects directly back to Derek Sproul's philosophy of integrity in action.
Yeah.
You are not just a human stamp machine passively observing paperwork.
No, you are an active, ethical guardian.
Exactly.
You protect the public trust every time you insist on a verbal oath, every time you refuse a rushed blanket statement, and every time you verify all 6 components of a certificate.
Yeah.
Having the courage to stop a rushing signer and the respect for your office to never skip the verbal ceremony, that is what integrity in action looks like in the real world.
As we wrap up today's session, there is a genuinely fascinating paradox from our deep dive into the source material that I really want to leave you with. It totally blew my mind when I read it.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
In states like Oregon, Washington, and Hawaii, the law actually allows the notary incredible flexibility in how they phrase the question for the oath. You don't always have to read some rigid, archaic script from the 1800s.
That's right. The input from the notary can be somewhat casual, tailored to the situation, so long as the core legal meaning is conveyed.
Right.
But here's the paradox. While there is flexibility in how the question is asked, there is absolutely zero flexibility in how the signer responds.
0.
The output, the moment they say I do or yes, is an immovable legal absolute. You can change how you ask it, but you can never accept silence, a nod, or a grunt as the answer.
The spoken word remains the ultimate anchor of the entire system. Well, we want to hear your scenarios and questions. Email your questions to Derek@dereksproul.com. We will try to answer as soon as possible at the end of our shows.
Executive producer Derek Spruill, lead writer Marylyn Trotter, graphics Eddie Montes Travis, music Thomas Bynum, produced by Magnificent Works Business Solutions.
Don't just be listeners of the knowledge, be doers of the knowledge. This is Notary Knowledge. Until next time.
Are you an aspiring notary looking to join millions of other notaries? Start your journey with the Notary Public Foundation by Derek Spruill. This essential guide provides the step-by-step process to becoming commissioned in your state. Don't stumble into the role. Walk into it with confidence. Grab your copy of the Notary Public Foundation by Derek Spruill on Amazon today.